We're talking with William F. Hamilton, author of the recent book, Cosmic Top Secret. Can you describe what that book is about in a couple of sentences?
Yes, what I'm trying to do here is trace the development of the early government crash retrieval operations, like the Roswell incident, and what has taken place since that time up to the present time. In other words, if there were such recoveries as alien spacecraft and alien bodies that were taken up to places like Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, we believe they didn't just put them in cold storage and let them sit there, but they were an object of scientific and engineering study. So over a period of time, there had to be a development cycle like there is in any engineering or scientific project. And there must be evidence today that that knowledge is being utilized by various scientific agencies and probably the aerospace industries at this time.
Do you have any of that evidence that you can describe right now?
Yes. Let me remark that there are two kinds of routes this evidence travels. Okay, one is by informants. That is, people who have worked on some phase of a secret or classified project that's dealing with this alien technology. And the other route is to go out to certain locations where there are secret installations and to do some observations. And there are witnesses who have gone out to these locations and they have seen evidence of advanced technology. And I can describe a couple of these to you, okay? The principal one, of course, that is well known is at the Nevada test site. Now, I've been following that for almost 10 years. When there was a report that came out in the early 80s that there was a secret project being conducted at the northern end of the Nevada test site, referred to as Project Red Light. Now, this name, Project Red Light, in fact, was stamped, the name Red Light, on some crates that a radio technician had seen back in the 1960s. So the project must have continued for some time. And there was an article, for instance, in the LA Times in 1984 about a lieutenant general who was the vice commander of the Air Force Systems Command, who was flying a specially modified Air Force test vehicle, and it crashed at Area 51. And I thought this was rather peculiar that such a high-ranking officer would be used as a test pilot, right? And so this sparked my curiosity. And of course, today we know that John Lear, son of Bill Lear, has come out with statements about what's going on in the Nevada test site. And we've heard about Bob Lazar and his involvement. And there have been other trickles of stories coming out of the Nevada test site, all indicating that there's a very strong possibility that alien technology is being tested at this test site. And if it is, then it's only part of a very large program of some magnitude, and there must be other feeder lines elsewhere and other activities and operations going on elsewhere. Well, in 1987, I moved out to the Antelope Valley. That's in the Palmdale and Lancaster area of California, and it's a big boom town. The population growth there has been tremendous. Out at Palmdale, we have Lockheed facilities, we have Air Force Plant 42, we have a concentration of the aerospace industry in that area. Well, I moved out to 10 acres in the West Antelope Valley, and soon discovered that I was barely maybe 8 miles away from a secret Northrop installation in the Tehachapi Mountains. And this installation came to my attention during a period of time in the summer of 1988 when a couple, the man whose name is Ray, was an inspector on the B-2 project at Northrop, okay? And he had gotten off a swing shift, and he and his girlfriend Nancy had gone up on this plateau, which is just outside of the perimeter fence area of this secure installation up there in the saddle of the mountains. And they saw a very strange object at about 1 o'clock in the morning when they were up there just looking at the lights, the stars, and what have you. And they saw what they described as being approximately a basketball-sized glowing orb rise out of the ground, okay, and gain some elevation, and it was to the east of them, less than about 100 yards away, and it just kind of sat there flashing, and there were electrical sparks coming off of it, and they were observing this for some minutes when next they noticed that the first dawn rays of sunlight were coming up over the eastern horizon, and they had some missing time. And Ray was put under hypnosis, and he told a very bizarre tale of being taken underground to what appeared to him to be a military installation. There were electronics, there were console panels, there were military uniformed men walking around. And he saw Nancy being put on this table, and surrounding the table were what he described as little gray alien beings, the typical large-headed, almond-shaped eyes, what have you. And at that point in his narration, he got very emotional, and he seemed to be blocked mentally in recalling the details of what happened to Nancy. He was very disturbed about this, and I considered that he was going through some genuine emotion. Now, they reported this, by the way, to somebody at Edwards Air Force Base because they thought, what's going on here, right? And they had some harassment afterwards, and they decided to withdraw, and they wouldn't even talk to me anymore. And just a few short months after that, on the night of the 26th of October, 1988, two very large boomerang-shaped objects flew over the West Valley, accompanied by about 17 discs. And they flew over this installation in the Tehachapis, and it grew very active after their flyover. And these objects were also seen later that night in the Fresno area, and it made the newspapers. And I was called by one of the reporters of the Antelope Valley Press and interviewed about this because these objects passed right over the back of my property, and there was a truck on the ground with a searchlight beam, and he was shining this beam to the rear of my property, and I couldn't imagine what was happening. So I got extremely interested in why these objects seemed to show an interest in what was going on around that area, especially in the saddle of the mountains. So I took a trip up there. I went up to the guard shack, and I did confirm that there was an installation up there. There was an airstrip. There are microwave antennas. There's several metal roof buildings. There are signs about checkpoints and this kind of thing. It's a very highly secure facility, so I started asking questions because I had started up monthly meetings, UFO meetings in the town of Lancaster, and I was inviting people from the Air Force Base or people involved in the aerospace industry who might want to disclose something to me in private to come forward and give me any kind of information they could. And eventually this did happen, and I talked to a number of people. Some of them were engineers who work in the so-called black world, okay, and they had done what we would consider to be more conventional projects in the black world, like working on the SR-71 or projects like that, but they had also done other kinds of projects that were highly classified. Okay, and these projects, they admitted to me, were projects that dealt with alien and super technology, and that a lot of these projects were being conducted in underground installations, and that a lot of these installations had tunnels at several levels. In fact, one man who I have his resume, okay, told me that there were 9 different levels right under Palmdale. Okay, and apparently some of these underground installations are all connected by tunnels of some kind.
It sounds as if you are making a direct connection between alien activity that's now occurring and the U.S. military. Is that true? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I believe that's happening, and especially in the past year, we have had observers going up with cameras and video cameras up to the Tehachapi location, and we have seen emanating out of this facility orbs approximately basketball size, just like Nancy had seen, glowing with a sun gold color. with a tremendous brilliance. And yet, as they pass and bob over the landscape, they do not illuminate the landscape around them. I mean, this is absolutely a puzzle in optical physics. Okay, so I know definitely that that is something that we would consider beyond the state of the art. Okay. Other things that have been observed are large triangular craft have been observed hovering for nearly 2 hours above the saddle in the mountains, right over the facility. A flying saucer has been seen, a typical flying saucer glowing in a green color, accelerating rapidly from the vicinity of that facility at a 45-degree angle into the southern sky. We have located since then 2 other facilities in the high desert that are highly secure. One is a Douglas facility and the other is a Lockheed facility. The Douglas facility is located near a place called El Mirage Dry Lake. And the Lockheed facility is being investigated by people over on the Victorville side, okay? And it's near Helendale. And a lot of UFO activity has been reported coming in to that facility and going out of that facility. And also, strangely, at the El Mirage facility, and I've talked to some of the locals there at the restaurant and around the area, and I've photographed the facility. They have a very strange pylon structure and a very large movable building, okay, that has cranes inside of it and what have you. And this building moves over the pylon, and then a brilliant light comes out of this pylon, right? And it doesn't illuminate the inside of the building. Other things that have been seen over this facility are blue beams of light that go up into the sky and then reach a certain point and bend, and sometimes merge with other beams of light, all right? All of this type of a phenomena has been associated in the past. The light beam bending phenomena, for instance, the brilliant light that does not reflect off surrounding objects, has been associated in the past with UFO activity, with what we consider alien craft, okay? So there seems to be a link here between the two, and matching up our observations with what the informants are saying, okay? Seems to indicate that indeed this is what's going on in that area.
Underground bases, you've talked about that. Do you feel that some of the allegations that aliens are doing experiments on humans and so forth in underground bases is true? Have you any evidence of that?
I have no evidence of it. All I have is testimony as to what is going on. The kind of activity that's been reported to me going on in the underground areas as regards to aliens is just very similar to the activity you hear from abductees being taken aboard a craft and being examined and specimens taken, fingernail specimens, hair specimens, semen specimens, ova being taken from females. It's very, very similar type of activity. Okay, and I've been told even by one of the engineers there, and he was very convincing, and he said, boy, if people do not believe that these aliens exist, I can assure you that they do. Okay, so there appears to be, here's the amazing thing, some of them have admitted to me working with or alongside these aliens, but with aliens they say that are as human as we are. So apparently there's something going on here that if we accept that there might be some validity to all of this, right? There is an ongoing collaboration occurring here.
Some researchers have alleged that alien technology has already found its way into military gear that is already visible to the public. Do you have any evidence of that?
Well, let me give you an example told to me by a woman who said she would deny it, okay? She told me her background. She was a manufacturing engineer, and she was hired by Boeing. She was also had gotten into areas of avionics. She had worked for Boeing, and she had worked for McDonnell Douglas. While working for one of these companies, okay, and I don't know who's involved in this, it might have been Boeing that's involved in the production of the LHX, which is the light experimental helicopter. She was very sincere when she told me that she had worked on a project that involved installing alien beam weapons aboard that helicopter. And this woman was no longer involved in engineering. She had taken up life as an artist. She got out of the program. She was a nervous wreck. She said she was under continual surveillance, that they had used narco-hypnosis on her to control her divulging this kind of information, and this created such problems in her life that she had become a drug addict, she had become an alcoholic, and eventually she got cured from these things and just got out of the whole program. She had 2 sons, and she said that she was frightened about talking to me because I was a little bit too high profile. And her story just matched others that I've heard, construction workers, technicians, engineers, various types like this.
If what you're saying is true, it paints a very disturbing picture of government activity and obviously things that the American public know very little about. Can you summarize what you would like to advise the American public in terms of how to respond to this information?
I think what we need to do, of course, is air all of the testimony and all of this information as much as possible through the media, and see what we can do to bring pressure for a congressional investigation of some kind. And in fact, I understand, as in regards to the Roswell incident, in regards to the testimony of these people, they're trying to record all of that and bring it to the attention of some of the congressmen involved, in order to at least see that some kind of ethical oversight might be implemented over some of these programs. I think it's important that that be done, and I think that it's important that the public be made aware, not of national security secrets so much as just the fact that we do have an alien presence and that we are developing this technology, and be assured that we're not developing this technology for some malevolent purpose.
We're talking with Fred Steckling, author of We Discovered Alien Bases on the Moon. Fred, I wonder if you could summarize for me briefly how it is that you got to the idea that we discovered alien bases on the moon. What led to the publication of your research?
My interest in astronomy and in aviation, I think, is partially responsible for starting me in looking up a lot more often than most people do. When I see an airplane, I hear an airplane, I look up, and during an afternoon in Washington, D.C. in the early 60s, in 1963, I had a sighting of a very, very strange bell-shaped object that was just about 1,500 feet above the ground, that started me off to investigate what these objects could be, where they come from, and what they're doing here. As I met some very, very interesting people, especially the author of several books written on UFOs, Mr. George Adamski, I found that he had in his book very much the same photographs of this object that I had seen over Washington, D.C. And writing to the officials, to the White House, to the Pentagon for more further information, I finally wound up in the Library of Congress because I did not get the answers that I was looking for, and to read Mr. Adamski's books. When he passed away, I went into 1965, I passed away in 1965, I went into research by obtaining very large telescopes. I had a 12.5-inch reflector and a 17.5-inch reflector now to study the moon, because I came to the conclusion that these craft visiting Earth would stop over on the moon. Since it's such a close place to Earth, that would make only sense. And my suspicion was rewarded by actually seeing enormous objects on the moon through my telescope. And
So you're saying that you have personally viewed objects on the moon that are not just part of the moon?
that's correct. I had a sighting with 8 people. Together we were at an elevation of 7,000 feet where we set up our telescope, where we observed 2 nights in a row 3 enormous large objects in the crater Archimedes, and cigar-shaped, one crater in the northern part, one spacecraft in the northern part, and 2 in the southern part of the crater. So when I made contact with other people that were interested in the same subject, they confirmed my findings, because they too had seen different objects, large objects on the moon. And so we worked together as a team to discover that there are other areas, the Alpine Valley, the many different craters on the moon that have had these objects either leaving crater or zooming over the area or landing in an area next to the crater. So that I have evidence for certain that something is going on that should not be there.
That sounds like something that would have to be seen by professional astronomers at the big observatories. Are they talking?
Some of them do, some of them don't. I remember one case of Walter Haas, was a professional astronomer that in the 1940s already had observed these mysterious objects on the moon and moving lights, and he had organized a group of astronomers that observed hundreds of these objects over a period of several weeks of watching. So he was one of the very few that really came out in the open to reveal this. I don't know of any other astronomers. I think that they see a lot and just don't talk very much. And the reason perhaps is that it is very difficult to get into such a position, and nobody really wants to rock the boat. It's too controversial.
Now, as I understand it, your book talks about things that NASA found, that the astronauts found when they went there. What did they find?
For instance, astronaut Stafford made a statement that he is observing right now very pretty little volcanoes on the moon. They found by leaving seismic instrumentation on the surface that there is still seismic activity that's registering there. That means that the moon is not a dead place, that something is taking place inside in its interior. They found water geysers spraying water over a wide area on the lunar surface. And they also, when the Apollo astronauts approached a surveyor spacecraft that had landed there earlier by remote control, they removed the camera system, and the whole spacecraft was thoroughly sterilized, everything. And when they brought the system back to Earth, they found microbes, not only on the lens, outside, but also inside the lens, growing in the camera system. And so consequently, microbes, according to my interpretation, means there's something alive. And that if there are microbes on the moon, that may lead to other living things.
Now, you're saying then that the geological conditions on the moon are not what we've been told. Are there other things there that we haven't been told about?
Oh, yes. During the Apollo flights, we discovered that the neutral point between the Earth and the Moon was not at 25,000 miles between the Earth and the Moon, but it was actually over 45 or 44,000 miles. That was reported in Time magazine and also in Spaceflight and Rocketry by Werner von Braun and other publications. And this changes the total concept of our gravity concept, because as farther the neutral point is away from the Moon, that means something is attracted toward from a distance much further out in space, means the gravity on the Moon is much higher. And it has been calculated that it's approximately 60 to 64% of Earth's gravity. That in turn changes our accepted theories, because we once believed the Moon cannot hold water and clouds and an atmosphere because it's too small. It doesn't have enough gravity, that's it. And so now we have to rethink these things, because definitely 64% is sufficient to hold an atmosphere and water.
Have you got any evidence that we have atmosphere and water there on the Moon?
No, yes, I surely do, because I have photographs, NASA photographs that show clouds on the Moon. Large clouds hanging over the lunar craters, and this is already evidence that an atmosphere must exist, because it has to be there to support the clouds.
And what about the alien bases themselves? What evidence have you got of that, and what do you think is there?
From my studies and my photographs, I find many oval and cigar-shaped and round glowing objects on the Moon. On the lunar backside, I have studied an area that shows 10 objects neatly parked in rows. Of course, it takes about 14, 15 times enlargement to see anything clearly, halfway clearly. But still, you can know for sure that this is something that is artificial. It's not artificial, but it's man-made, because there are rows lined up of seem to be like egg-shaped objects or oval objects that have to be made by some intelligent creatures in civilization.
Everything you're saying runs contrary to what we're told about the Moon and about what we found on the Moon, which suggests that a huge secret is being kept. Why is that secret being kept?
Well, some information has been released. First of all, as I stated earlier, the neutral point discrepancies were released in public publications. That's admitting of the officials. All that it's required by the public to think. If this is that way, how can it be that way? It requires some logical thinking. The fact that lunar quakes were reported was released to the public through news media, and also that water vapor was discovered on the Moon is also released at that time, you see. So there is not really a cover-up. There have been releasements of facts that require us to think and perhaps to dig a little further into it and ask some questions and to further investigate it. Why the military perhaps would keep this as close as possible as the information would be because the Moon, from a military engineering point of view, would be a perfect base for us. We could go there, we could set up bases, we could live there for a great length of time, and could watch the Earth, and as a superior power from the military point of view would be a tremendous advantage for us to keep this as secret as possible. But however, they have released enough information that if we seek and you search, you find that something is going on. Otherwise, I would not have been able to come to my conclusion and to write my book and get the 100 NASA pictures in it that show what is going on there.
Do you think that there is an alien presence on this planet? And if so, what does that mean to the people of this country and the world?
It seems to be that humans from other planets are on Earth and visiting Earth already for a long time, and they're studying our progress and our development. And who knows, We are taking everything for granted these days, our inventions, our new technology. Perhaps some of it has been given to us. I remember Dr. Hermann Obert, a German scientist who was working for the Bell Laboratories before he retired, and that was in Buffalo, New York. Before he retired, he made a statement to the press. He said, "Gentlemen, we cannot take credit for all our inventions and new findings to ourselves. We have been helped." And they said, "Well, doctor, who did it?" And he said, "These guys from up there." And they considered the poor man not quite right in his mind. All of a sudden, he turned from a knowledgeable professor into an insane old man overnight, making such a statement. But maybe that is exactly what is happening. Because if we are looking at our civilization and study it carefully, we're living in the Stone Age environment for so long, and all of a sudden, at the turn of the century, we started to develop into a highly technical society, into microchips, into computers, into a space flight, and maybe we have been helped to do that. Maybe that's our next step, so that we not only see what other worlds are like and that they are similar in many ways, but also to be able to look at our own Earth so we can improve it much better. Because from the astronaut's point of view, and going into space and studying this planet has broadened our horizons tremendously to see what we need to do. We can see the effects of pollution and the effects of destruction from space over the whole Earth much better, and then we can look at it from a universal point, from a universal level, no longer looking at different countries and different continents and blaming and pointing fingers at each other, but looking at the Earth and that we must preserve because it's our home and we are systematically destroying it right now. And perhaps the extraterrestrials are here to make us aware of that fact and pushing us out into space so that we can see that.
So you seem to be suggesting that the alien presence that you're aware of is good news for the planet and perhaps is assisting us to understand our role on this planet better than we have. Is that right?
Yes, that's what I think, because having the technology that they have, controlling and piloting and moving enormous spacecraft of many miles in length through space, they would be so far advanced that they could have taken over this planet long ago if this is what their intentions are. And no matter how sophisticated our weapons are today on Earth, we would have no defense against them if they would decide to become hostile. Since they have not done that, since they have permitted us to go to the moon, to photograph everything, to land there and to leave, they have to be friendly. And so we can learn a lot from them. If we would openly acknowledge, the officials would openly acknowledge this, yes, our astronauts went to the moon, they've made contact with these people, there's a wealth of information and technology that is available for us and that we can benefit from it if we cooperate. That would be very helpful if something like this was come out to the open. I certainly am working for it, make public aware of it, that this is possible, and they should investigate it and not to give up, to write to the officials, to the congressmen, to the senators, and to NASA, to let NASA know that we are supporting them. We want them to continue to investigate space and go out there.
Thank you very much, Fred.
You're welcome. During my investigation, after Nancy passed away, I wrote to the Pentagon, afterwards again, and to the Senate Space Committee, and to NASA in Greenbelt, Maryland. And I told them that I have these motion pictures and these movies that were made of UFOs, and if they would be willing to see them, I would be willing to show them to them. I was invited to go and to show these pictures and these motion pictures and movies to the branches of the government. Colonel Freeman and his staff, Pentagon, Senator Anderson, at that time, during the 66 of the Senate Space Committee, and as well as the NASA in Greenbelt, Maryland, where 22 scientists in a closed session viewed these films with great interest and gave me and us a confirmation that these things exist. As a matter of fact, they told me and they told us, my wife and other people that came along for this conference, that these ships the altitude of them and the speed that they perform. And one of the scientists asked us a very, very unusual question. He said, do you know how many of these space people, or these extraterrestrials, live under us, among us? How many? Do you have an idea? I said to him, Professor, if you just asking me this question, that means you admit that they must be looking like us, because if someone walks on that looks like an insect, we shouldn't would know the difference. So this group of people that last we had contact with were human beings by all means. And they wanted to know how many of them are here, how many of them are studying our behavior and our lifestyle, so they can report back home why we are in so much trouble. How come we cannot get nations together to become one nation? How come we have to go to war constantly and fight for our differences? Why do we have to why do we have abundance in some countries and throw the food away, and why do we starve others? What's going on in our minds? What makes us so different, going to church every Sunday and praying to God that we will do the very best and be the best of people, and the rest of the week we go out in plain English? Why do we do things like that? And they definitely seem to be interested in our behavior. Why? And for those of you that may question, how can they live under us? Where would they get their papers from and their IDs? Let me tell you, we have about 8 million illegal aliens living in America right now. They have never seen a green card before. And if there is, it's phony. So I'm sure that if we know how to do it, they coming from other planets which have an intelligence thousands of years developed above ours, they certainly know how to live here without being detected. When I obtained a very, very large telescope, a 17.5-inch reflector, which is about up to the ceiling, looks like one of those howitzers, those big cannons for shooting in Saudi Arabia, this kind of thing. And I started to study the planets without much of a good result, because they're so far away that so you see Mars, big deal. It doesn't look like a golf ball any longer. It looks now like a watermelon, but you still can't see anything on it. It's just too far. So the moon was the closest neighbor, 250,000 miles away, and that's where I spent my time. And it isn't easy when you're young. Today I'm in my 50s, but when you're young and you have a wife, and it isn't it's difficult to make understand that there are nights that you have to spend with this telescope and not with her. And many times it didn't go over very big. And so my viewing times are sometimes limited, which you perhaps can understand. But nevertheless, I put in a lot of hours and managed a lot of hours of studying our closest neighbor. There, to our surprise, we had a group of people over, and we were at an elevation of 7,000 feet above sea level, and about 8 people came to visit that night. I pulled the telescope out and studied to focus it on the crater Archimedes, and there were 3 enormous objects filling half the crater. And Archimedes is about 80 miles in diameter, it's a big one. And 3 enormous objects, one part north in the crater, 2 of them south, cigar-shaped. And everyone, of course, looked through the telescopes. We changed lenses, we changed filters, we made sure that somebody didn't paint something in front of the lens, or we've seen there's some flying moving on. Anyway, we just want to make sure what we actually see. And they were there for 2 nights, and then they disappeared. When I did some measurements, I have these large Air Force charts from the government printing office of the lunar surface, and shows exact dimension of all the craters, the crevices, the cracks, the ravines, and everything. And when I start measuring these spacecraft parked in this crater Archimedes, there was absolutely no doubt in my mind that no place, nowhere do we on Earth would ever even attempt to build one of those things, not to talk about 3. Because if we have to build an aircraft carrier today, it will drain our finances, our tax dollars. And if you take a spacecraft that's 10 miles in length, for instance, and just take a computer and start to compute what material would go into a craft like this, we would totally deplete our resources, our finances, not just on this planet, but also on the whole world, even if we put our monies all together. And then getting the people together, disciplined, to build a thing like this without going on strike every second day, And that would be very difficult too. So whoever did this and whoever built these things must possess an enormous technology, far above anything that we ever dreamt of. So my investigation and studying the moon very carefully, I found that they are going there with a good purpose. Not just to study us, there may be one also. Because from the moon they can watch us very close while they're out of range. Because we are not friendly people. In the early days we clubbed each other over the head with sticks, and today with the same mentality we are capable of annihilating the planet, and we're doing a good job right now polluting it to death. Not to talk this warfare. In other words, we have progressed tremendously scientifically, but unfortunately, socially, we haven't done very much for ourselves. And so they are watching us and to see what in the world we're doing, and just staying out of sight, or at least out of reach from lasers and perhaps even nuclear missiles. There were some officials some years ago that wanted to send rockets to the moon with nuclear warheads. So you see, we have very strange people in this time. Not all of us, but some of us. When I continued my studies about the activities on the moon, I found something very, very interesting, and that is that all the way back to 1922, the French astronomical journal, L'Astronomie, as the French call it, they have reported huge objects that they had also observed with their telescopes in the crater Archimedes. So they also had noticed something is landing there periodically. They must be taking something there, they must be picking something up. There has to be some reason to land such enormous craft there.
What year was that?
In 1922. In 1930, Mount Wilson Observatory, using a 100-inch reflector that was just installed there, photographed the complex tube system in the Sandy crater, the Sandy A and B, and the whole Sandy system. That showed a tube system connecting tunnels and tubes that was very sophisticated. It looked like some kind of a base, or perhaps some kind of a mining setup. From what NASA has released, the moon is extremely rich in minerals, and it will, in the future, as they said, be delivering sufficient materials for our space stations. Everything that we ever need to build, we can find on the moon. And so it is understandable that perhaps other people traveling the system, finding that satellites such as the moon with very little or thin atmosphere, they are perfect places to mine without using their own planets and depleting their own planets. Then later, during the 40s, astronomer Lindemann reported an 18-mile tunnel between the crater Messier and Pickering. In 1915, would you believe this, the British Astronomical Society reported the Christmas surprise, they say, and it says that long black objects were seen in the crater Aristarchus, as well as many rows of glowing lights in the crater Plato, turning on and off like a dizzy routine, like the Christmas tree that we have set up for our decorations. Studying this area, the Mount Python area in the Alpine Valley on the moon, I found one night an amazing object rising out of the crater. There's a mountain, this crater called Mount Python. It's cut open, perfectly round, like you cut something with a circle. And out of it came a glowing object. It first rose above the mountain, hovered there for a few seconds, and then at an angle, slowly moved toward the lunar surface, up from several thousand feet in elevation. However, it picked up speed after about 2 minutes or so, all of a sudden, probably 78,000 miles an hour, because it zoomed over the lunar surface with a fantastic rate of speed and disappeared. That was a very, very convincing sighting for me. On July 10, 1941, the American astronomer Walter Haas reported sightings of two large glowing objects swimming over the lunar surface, and 12 additional similar sightings were reported to the same group of astronomers that he set up, organized by Walter Haas, within 770 hours of observation. To give you an idea, this is a graph that I had seen, my wife and I had seen, over Washington, D.C. This was taken with an 8mm movie camera by George Adamski and Mrs. Marvin Rutherford in 1965 in Silver Spring, Maryland, just a few weeks before Adamski passed away. And this is a still of the scout craft. Please, next one, please. There are 3 pictures of that in sequence. Here you see the same type of craft. It is slightly bent out of shape. This is due to the force field or the magnetic propulsion system that gives you the appearance of the craft being like made out of rubber. That means it's not a model, it's not hung up because you cannot change the appearance of a model. It will always look a model, no matter how you photograph it. This is a machine 30 feet in diameter, and it has been only 75 feet from the camera, and it was analyzed by Kodak engineers in 1965 and found to be genuine. At that time, the Republic of Grenada, that was long before we invaded it, put a stamp out. Research identified flying objects, and they have, as you can see, they use this the UFO with a 3-ball undercarriage, plus an electromagnetic device that travels space. This is a photograph that was taken through a telescope by George Adamski long, long ago that shows a large, huge object, a mothership hovering at very high altitude, and these glowing ships around it. The glow comes from an ionizing the air, the atmosphere around it. In other words, when this craft is in the atmosphere and it starts to operate and it turns on its machines, once it had left the mothership, right in the bottom you see one of them leaving right here. The mothership is neutral, hangs in space, motionless neutral, while the small craft leave it on the bottom so air shoots, and they turn on their powers and they start to pulsate in different colors, like usually the colors of the spectrum. And they actually inside concealed in it because the field which is surrounding the craft is concealing the craft inside. This is part of the propulsion system. This one was taken in 1952 by Adamski, and this is an enormous, approximately over 1 mile long spacecraft. This is when taken close to the moon, over the lunar surface, a large glowing mothership. This is very difficult to say. I have not been able to make it. This is a very close-up picture of one of the small craters that shows one part. Right here. Right here. Can you focus a little bit more? You must remember now to enlarge these photographs sometimes 14 times. This is a NASA photo, and to enlarge this area 14 times, that makes it fuzzy after a while. You can only go that far. Next, please. This is a picture that I have on my one page. This is a NASA photo. It shows an enormous large object between our orbiting spacecraft and the lunar surface. There's another one behind it up on top, as you see, and also the shadow that is cast on the left of the ship and behind it, showing you that it's above the ground. Yeah, the long thing. Here's a construction on the moon that looks extremely artificial. Not only is the crater perfectly cut, but this huge setup on this side, on the left side of it, which is about 30 miles in length. That is a lunar orbiter photo. This was taken through the telescope and shows one of the scout-type ships close to the lunar surface. And here's some more, very close to the moon. Up there, high above the moon. Somebody said to me, and my son told me, somebody told him that it looks like the spaceship Enterprise. Yeah, that's funny. And then another one. And here is also a NASA photo. My photographs that I have in my book all have the numbers there, the NASA numbers, and so that they can be ordered from NASA. Let me show you one here, right here over the craters, one over here, and another one on the left side. Three of them altogether on this picture. With the field turned on, power turned on. And a group of them over the on the surface. No, that was taken through the telescope from Earth. Here's one, that's a NASA lunar orbiter photo. It looks like a grain of rice or something. Actually, later. This is on the backside of the moon. This is a 14 times enlarged picture. Notice what I found here. Many objects lined up neatly, closely together. There have been some people that try to tell me that these are rocks that are rolled in this position by nature, but I'd like to see that first. There, over the crater, on our side of the moon, hangs a large cloud. The shadow right below, so it means there has to be an atmosphere. This is a NASA picture showing a large cloud of mist covering this particular crater. And when the astronaut orbited the moon and came back and photographed this crater again, the mist had moved north because the crater now is clearly visible. That means the moon has an atmosphere to carry these clouds. This crater has a very large cloud hanging over the side of its left rim. This is also taken from the backside of the moon. Just recently I found this picture that comes from an area of the crater system here called Van de Graaff. And there is a small crater on top where material is pumped out into the big crater below. Here's a small crater, it's like a bowl that's tilted, and material comes out over here and fills up this crater. Which means that there are mining operations on the moon. There's somebody there that is mining the moon, and that crater image changes because and I have personally found areas on the moon where craters have disappeared and areas where craters are reappearing. Somebody is, in other words, covering stuff up and digging new craters. So somebody is there with some machines to mine the moon. Over here, this is a lunar orbiter photo, and it shows a large, which looks very much like an irrigation pond, like I see for my aircraft here in California. However, this one has an island in the center which looks almond-shaped. As a comparison, it's a photograph I took for my airplane of one of our irrigation ponds. Look at the shape. And now the next picture, another lunar picture showing one of this reinforced walls right up here again. So you must admit something is going on there. Here is a large object over this area, covering partially this crater. Maybe it's a huge building or some kind of a roof or some kind of construction. And in the same area, just north of it, two more, one here and one over on the other side. This is a color picture, and we see very, very little of those on the moon. It was taken by Apollo 8, and it shows an area like the northwest desert area of the United States, where you can see in the crater, you see brown colors everywhere in between, and in the craters, in the shady side, the color green. It doesn't show up too good. It has to be very, very dark to see this nice and clear, but it shows that it looks like vegetation. Some form of kind of chaparral or some kind of brush or something that may go there. This is a drawing of the recent project that we are doing. A couple of friends of mine, we are observing, right now studying this particular construction, which is in the Sea of Crisis, Mare Crisium, and it's called Cape Agrilum. There's an area called Cape Agrilum, right at the end of Agrilum, which is 8,000 feet above the valley, the floor of the crater. It's an enormous construction. This construction from the bottom to the top is thousands of feet in height. That shows it has a large 2,000-foot ball on top. It's like a huge, it looks very much like some kind of a Van de Graaff generator. That's what we think it is, because we have a photograph. We managed just recently to get a photograph of it after 3 days of new moon, and I have a small photograph that shows just the edge of it. We can see it looks like a mother holding a child with two big arms all the way down into the valley, where on the base is another small ball of 800 feet in diameter. So it must be some kind of and the whole structure is 7,000 or 8,000 feet from the bottom to the top, something enormous. And we did order some NASA photographs of the Apollo that already the Sea of Crisis, and unfortunately they are retouched, and the whole mountain range has been brushed off, has totally taken out. So I think they must be hiding something there, because it is an enormous, large construction. And here's some more spacecraft as they take off from the moon and towards space, taken through a telescope. And the last one that I have on the page of my book, the last photograph, is the astronaut with this mysterious thing hovering over his head. Nobody has been able to explain what in the world it is.
Okay, so I'll be, doing things like this. Bill, I know you've just published a new book called Cosmic Top Secret. Can you summarize in a few sentences what that book is about?
I'm sorry, it's top secret.
Very nice audience, and thank you for sharing your lunchtime and giving it up. And I'm sorry that I took a little extra time, but I noticed the other speakers didn't take it too serious. Why should I? Thank you.